Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Cutter One. I am your host, Jay, your resident troublemaker and your resident culture warrior. I hope you are all doing freaking awesome. Okay. Um, yeah. Okay, this is gonna be one of those videos where I'm like, tell me you're not really into Tolkien without telling me you're not really into Tolkien. And you'll see what I mean in a second. Um, let's get right into it. This is an article coming to us from our friends over at Screen Rant, and I say friends just in the most generic term. I don't know them, so don't anybody take it the wrong way. All right, the Rings of Power cut the most confusing part of Galadriel's backstory. Galadriel's backstory is full of unanswered questions, and Rings of Power has chosen to leave out its darkest and most confusing part of her story. In The Lord of the Rings of Power, Season 1, Galadriel described how her people came to Middle-earth, but she left out the most confusing part. The story set the tone for Galadriel's desperation to squash the evil in Middle-earth so that she could again return to her home, Valinor. However, the details of this tale are significantly different from the one told in author J.R.R. Tolkien's The Silmarillion, and leaves out the parts that seem to give contradictory versions of Galadriel's canon. In The Rings of Power, Galadriel talks of the paradise that was her home until the Dark Lord Morgoth destroyed the two trees of Valinor. Unwilling to let this crime go unpunished, the elves sailed to Middle-earth, Galadriel with them, and went to war. The results were devastating. Devastating? The results were devastating, and Galadriel revealed that her people learned of death for the first time. Among the casualties was Galadriel's brother, Finrod, who was killed by Sauron. It's a tale of bravery, valor, and vengeance, significantly different from Tolkien's canon. Galadriel's people led a rebellion that resulted in their banishment from Valinor. In the Silmarillion's version of events, because now that's been demoted down to a version, right? Get the fuck out of here. In the Silmarillion's version of events, Galadriel's people, the Noldor, wished to sail to Middle-earth to retrieve the stolen Silmarils. However, the Valar forbade them from going. The prince of the Noldor, Feanor, had been the one to create the Silmarils, which are only mentioned briefly in the Rings of Power, and he convinced his people that the Valar had abandoned them and that they had no choice but to sail to Middle-earth and fight Morgoth themselves. When they did this, another group of elves, called the Teleri, tried to stop them, and a battle broke out. No. This battle, which was entirely left out of the Rings of Power, became known as the kinslaying of Alqualande, and it so enraged the Valar that the Noldor were subsequently banned from returning to Valinor. This meant that once Galadriel arrived in Middle-earth, she had to stay there. After Morgoth's defeat centuries later, the Valar extended forgiveness to many of the Noldor, but Tolkien had contradictory things to say about whether this included Galadriel. In some versions, Galadriel was one of the primary leaders of the rebellion and was not excused, which fits with her Rings of Power character. In parts of the letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, the writer states that Galadriel fought valiantly to defend the Teleri. In others, written long after the Silmarillion, he says that she wasn't even there and had only innocently sailed for Middle-earth beforehand with a desire to explore. Ultimately, it seems that even Tolkien himself wasn't exactly sure where Galadriel fit in that part of the story. Why Rings of Power left out the kinslaying, because it's fucking stupid. In the Rings of Power, Galadriel's version of the story eliminates the importance of the Silmarils in the war against Morgoth. They are only mentioned in the explanation of Mithril, which still isn't quite canon. Without this crucial detail, the kinslaying of Alqualande would make very little sense and would also contradict the series' idea that everyone was perfect before coming to Middle-earth. The shaky details surrounding Galadriel's involvement in the kinslaying leaves little canon for the Rings of Power to hold on to. Since Galadriel is the central character, the writers would have been forced to decide once and for all whether the beloved elf was on the good or bad side of the conflict. By making her inability to return to Valinor a personal vow, they opted out of another potentially controversial change. Leaving the Silmarils out of the First Age is a difficult pill to swallow for many Tolkien fans. So it seems that The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, can't win one way or another. Well, let's sort of let's look at this a little bit deeper. No, they actually could have. Again, the reason why I said this is tell me you're not really into Tolkien without telling me you're not really into Tolkien, because even when the author of this article, a woman by the name of Angel Shaw, okay, what she doesn't seem to understand is that she says that a fight broke out, right? Because the Teleri tried to stop the Noldor from leaving. Right? I'm just looking for actually where she says that exactly, because it's clearly you didn't read the book. Okay, there it is. She says, um, when they did this, another group of elves called the Teleri tried to stop them, and a battle broke out. That is not what happens, and you guys know this who have read the Silmarillion, okay? What happens, for those who may not be up to speed, is that Feanor and his Noldor, his group of Noldor, okay, because there's actually two groups. One, Feanor and his group, they're the gung ho ones, right? That want to go after Morgoth to get the Silmarils back, right? They're sort of at the front of the line, and then behind them is Fingolfin and sort of like the second wave of the Noldor that are going to Middle Earth, right? Anyway, and Galadriel's with them. Galadriel's with the second wave, right? So long story short, the Noldor under Feanor's group of Noldor, basically tell the Teleri of Alqualande and the Swan Bay, I believe it's called. We're taking your boats. We need your boats, to get over to Middle Earth. And the Teleri say, no, 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 no. You're not just taking our boats. So Feanor and his guys literally try to start taking the boats. Like, they start boarding the boats. Like, we're taking your boats, yo. Like, they belong to us now. Shut the fuck up. To which the Teleri are like, oh, hell no. And that's when the fight starts. It is not just the way that this author sort of makes it sound, is that, that the Noldor felt that the Valar had abandoned them and that they had no choice but to sail to Middle Earth and fight Morgoth themselves, and that when they did this, another group of elves called the Teleri just tried to stop them and a battle broke out. That's not what it is. Feanor and them were literally trying to steal. They were boat jacking the Teleri, basically. Okay, but the Teleri weren't going to take it lying down, so the Teleri fought back, and that's what causes the kinslaying. Now, in this, in Galadriel's part in this, is that she's with the second group of Noldor that show up while this is all going down, and she ends up fighting to defend the Teleri. Okay, so she's fighting. So you would think that since they made Galadriel in the show an updated version of Xena Warrior Princess, you would think they'd want to work that in, because it's like literally a documented case of Galadriel picking up a sword. She literally fought to defend the Teleri. Now you may ask, well, why did she fight to defend the Teleri since she was with the Noldor, the second wave of Noldor that were leaving? Because her mother, the Teleri, are Galadriel's mother's people. Okay, Galadriel, her parents are, okay, because I always get the names messed up. So you guys, I want to say Finwë, Finway. Again, I always get his name screwed up. And Arwen, Arwen, yes, yes, yeah, Arwen. Okay, and her mother Arwen is Tellery, right? So Galadriel's sort of half Noldor, half Tellery elf. So she's defending her mother's people, right? Who ultimately lose, and the Noldor take the boats, take the ships. Um, and Galadriel has no love for Feanor. Okay, she actually, the reason why she continues to go to Middle Earth, and now she had other reasons for wanting to go to Middle Earth, but one of her things is to sort of thwart his plans going forward because she really does not like Feanor. She really doesn't like. It's a shame Tolkien never got around to explaining why, because like right out of from the onset, she really does not like Feanor. But I digress. Maybe because she has the ability, she knows people's thoughts, right? But so yeah, so it wasn't just some random fight between elves. Like there's a story there. There's a rich story there. And Galadriel actually does take up the sword to defend the Tellery. So you would think they'd want to work that in because that gives a little justification. You would think for the Xena warrior princess Galadriel that we got in the show, but apparently not. And so apparently it's just like, hey, they just wanted to go to Middle Earth, to go fight Morgoth, I guess, because he just like pissed him off, and that's pretty much it. And then it just everybody gets into a fight, and her brother dies, and so now she's just driven by vengeance. It's the what she says about, since Galadriel is the central character, the writers would have been forced to decide once and for all whether the beloved elf was on the good or bad side of the conflict. She was on both, and it's plainly evident. She doesn't want to fight other elves, okay? But she sees the Tellery, her mother's people, being slaughtered, okay? So it's sort of like you're reluctant. She's reluctantly getting into the fight, right? And so by making her inability to return to Valinor a personal vow, they opted out of another potentially controversial change. So, like I said, this Angel Shaw person who wrote this article, I kind of get the vibe like she's trying to say, well, this is why they did it, and it makes sense. But the reality is like, no, it's just you completely changed Galadriel's backstory to the point where, what we got in the show is just, it's not Galadriel. It's literally Lucy Lawless's Xena warrior princess with blonde hair. And yeah, I don't know. I just that whole article is just kind of like, so what are you trying to say? Now she does mention that Tolkien did tweak Galadriel's story, because there is a version where just her and Celebrimbor left on their own before all of that went out and weren't part. But again, you get my philosophy tends to be, well, what is in the books, right? Like what is in the books that is part of the story, not what is in the books that's sort of supporting material for the story. Because we have a lot of stuff in like the other books, like Unfinished Tales, Nature of Middle Earth, and all that stuff, which explain to us, we have Tolkien's thoughts on why he's writing things the way he's writing them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's part of the story. If you understand what I'm saying, there's supporting material for the story. I tend to think in situations like this, that what this article is talking about, like what's Galadriel's backstory, I tend to go with, well, what is part of the published story, i.e. what's in the Silmarillion, right? That's what I'm going to go with. Okay. Yes, Tolkien does have notes where he played with her and Celeborn's backstory right up into the end. But I'm going with what's in the published books. That's always been my sort of baseline. When in doubt, go with what's in the stories in the books, right? Um, so yeah, like this article, like I said, it just seems like again, it's more like justification for the show as to why they changed her story, why they broke the lore, why they made her something into something that she never was. And I just don't buy it because I think the original story that's in the Silmarillion is a far better one, right? Where she has to step up and defend her mother's people from her father's people, for lack of a better term, right? Um, and I don't like this sort of roundabout way of like, oh, we're gonna justify, you know, discarding the lore and making up our own, shitty version of this, just because it's easier than trying to stick to what Tolkien wrote. So anyway, that's just my opinion. I just wanted to share that with you guys because like they sort of gloss over these big things that are important to understanding the story, and they just say, "Oh yeah, well, they wanted to leave and go fight Morgoth, and these other elves just tried to stop them and stuff, and which caused them to fight, and you know." The Valar got pissed off about it, so they banned all the Noldor from it. And it's like that is so not what happens. But they just sort of say it as if like, oh well, we all know that's what happened, and it's just like no. But anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Do you think the backstory that we got for Guy Ladriel in the Rings of Nonsense um, was anywhere near as good as the actual backstory that we get from the Silmarillion? Let me know. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. And do you guys like me? Like, are you like me? Like, what's considered canon to you is like what's in the printed versions of the story, like the published Silmarillion, the published Lord of the Rings trilogy, the published Hobbit, and you understand that a lot of these Tolkien's notes on changes he was thinking about making to Galadriel do not necessarily constitute he's changed Galadriel. It just shows that he was toying with other ideas, right? And that's not somehow an excuse to be like, well, see, even Tolkien couldn't settle on what he wanted for Galadriel. No, it just shows that as the author, he created this character, and he was like, I wonder what happens if I tweak this. I wonder what happens if I tweak that. It doesn't make her a better or worse character. That's what authors do, right? Authors, we as the public, we see the final version, and I know this because my wife is writing a book right now, right? We see the final version, but you don't know how many drafts have been gone through and changes were made. My wife's on like the fourth or fifth version of her book, right? With revisions and changes. And, you make this one change to this one character in the beginning of the book and you realize that it changes things like, 7 chapters later, and you have to work these things out. But that doesn't necessarily mean that what is published in the book cannot be considered canon. My take is what's published in the book is canon. Anything else is just an insight into the author's thought process. But that's how I view it. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. If you like the video, like the video. If you feel like sharing the video, by all means do so. It gets us out there. It gets us seen. It gets this whole thing some momentum. If you have not subscribed but are considering it, I would hope that you would and join the team and join the fight. And you could be down with the total crew of beautiful badasses that we are. And if you are a returning subscriber, well, you are one of those beautiful badasses, and I enjoy making these videos for you guys and seeing your comments down below. I really do like reading them all. Like you guys don't know, like I will sit there and spend like an hour on my phone. Sorry, I just kicked my desk. An hour on my phone, just like scrolling through all your comments and just being like. So. I do enjoy reading them, and I do try to read all of them. And I try to comment wherever I can. Sometimes you guys just comment in such a way that I'm like, you know what? There's nothing for me to add. Like the comment was perfect as is. I'm just gonna like it, and I'm gonna leave it alone because nothing else needs to be added to it. So I do like seeing that. So again, leave your comments down in the section. You know what I. Leave your comments down in the comment section below. I will read them. All right, guys. I will let you go because apparently my mouth is going on strike. All right, guys. Until next one, be good, be safe, be awesome. I'll see you soon. Peace.